And we're going to make this brush black, just about as black as you can get. I'm going to make it black, and we're going to just start to slowly darken everything. And right now, let's go up to opacity for our brush. If we did 100%, it'd be quite dramatic, but you could see the effect we're trying to go for. We're really trying to focus on the title, but I still want you to see the rest of the photo. So what I might do is reduce the, not the flow, I'm over at the flow, the opacity. We're going to want to reduce the opacity so that we can go back through our brush and still show hints of everything else. So let's go ahead and zoom out, and let's start to kind of darken this, and of course it's trial and error. So as you see it, you may want to increase the opacity of it. And you can always go back through and do it again, and it'll continue to darken it. And we're going to keep those two flowers the same. And you can even take your brush, let's go ahead and go back, and make it smaller so you can do kind of some smaller darkening. Might even increase the opacity a little bit more. I don't want to take completely away the background. So I'm just changing my brush size and changing the opacity to kind of get a nice blended effect. And of course you can always, since this is its own layer, you can always toggle it on and off and start over if you're not happy. Or you can take the eraser tool and do the same thing we just did with painting, but you could do it with erasing. So I have a soft round brush. If I want to go back and say, well, I overdid it there, I can just take my eraser tool and bring back certain objects. So between the brush tool and the eraser tool, I kind of find ways to kind of darken certain areas, but this is going to look a lot better once we kind of edit the photo. We can always go back. We have our separate layer here. We can go back and erase certain points to make it look a little better. So what we need to do is we need to do some serious photo editing. I think these flowers in the photo look a little dull, so let's really add vibrant reds and deep greens into this. Make it look like a lush garden. So we're going to do just that. We're going to go ahead and I'm just selecting these top two layers. Let's do this first. I want to maybe sharpen them a little bit, so I'm just going to go up and sharpen. Just going down to filter, sharpen, and I just like to do a little sharpening on a lot of photos, especially if they look a little blurry. So I'm just going to go back and sharpen those two. And let's also select both of these and go, we're going to do several adjustments. And let's see what we can do here for hue and saturation. Maybe add a little bit more saturation. Let's also do contrast. So what we're doing is we're in brightness contrast, adding a little more contrast, bringing that flower out. And let's go to color balance. I want to add more vibrant red there. So I'm in midtones. I'm just seeing what I can do here. Let's bring out the shadows of the red, maybe the highlights. Maybe see if I could do the same thing with the other one. So those are already looking a little bit better. So let's do the overall background photo, the same thing. Let's see if we can go back. We have our item here. Let's see if we can't do some color balance. Kind of see what would look a little more vibrant. Adding a little blue kind of helped. This is trial and error. I mean, after a while you kind of get used to what works and what doesn't work. See, adding a little blue kind of added a lot of deep richness to the green there. Go to shadow and highlights, and this will add a huge impact to how it looks by decreasing the tone, the radius. See, adding midtones really brought out a lot of that color. So after doing some color adjustments, this is one thing we probably need to talk about. So I was in I'm in CMYK mode when doing this, and you do have limitations in Photoshop with your photo editing when you're in CMYK color mode, which is great for printing, and that's what we want to end up exporting our file as. But sometimes when you're working with photo manipulations and book covers like this, you really want to have the most vibrant colors available, and CMYK limits you to some of that. So as you can see, when I go up to adjustments, I have several of these things grayed out: exposure, vibrance, black and white. And that's because we are in CMYK mode. So if you ever see those options grayed out and you really want to use those options, you cannot in CMYK. So one thing I like to do is just temporarily switch this to RGB to do kind of the photo work. And then at the very end, we're going to make sure we export it and convert it to CMYK. And hopefully the colors don't shift too much and we're going to be happy with it. So let's go ahead and go to Image, RGB mode. Let me go ahead and do that again so you can see that. I'm going to go to Image, Mode, and we're switching the mode. We can also do grayscale if you want, to RGB. And it's going to ask you a bunch of questions, and just say don't flatten, because that'll flatten it all into one image, and we don't want that. So everything's been converted back to RGB, and we're going to eventually make sure we export as CMYK. And the only reason we're doing this is we really want to have max control over color correction and editing, and then eventually we will export it as a CMYK for printing because they're going to need it in that mode. So now we're going to have a little bit more options when editing our photo. I'm actually going to toggle off our little blackened dark areas so I can kind of see how the photos are going to be affected when I do the adjustments. So here, let's try this again. Let's go ahead and select the big background photo, and now we have exposure available, which is very helpful in really bringing out some of this color. So let's see if we get to decrease the exposure, increase it. Let's maybe reduce offset. Ooh, look at that. So when I reduce the offset, look at how all those rich colors, the dark shadow colors, really come out. Gamma. I like that. Look how much shinier. I'm going to go back. This is how it was. And let's go ahead and see what it was after. So just a little bit more contrast there. Let's also do vibrance. We can also add a little vibrance, which is kind of like saturation. It's a little bit different than saturation, but it acts a little bit the same. So if I reduce the vibrance and then increase the vibrance, you can see how dramatic that effect can be. Of course, increasing saturation will add that rich red to it. And I'm going to do the same thing that we just did for these individual flowers. So I'm going to decrease that offset. Notice that. Look at that. Look at that dramatic contrast there that's been developed because of that. We don't want to oversaturate because then it starts to look all one color. We want to keep those highlights and shadows together. So we're not going to do saturation on that one. Wow, what a difference. What a difference. What I'd like to do is make these leaves more, they look a little more mint. I'd like to make them kind of more green grass kind of color. So let's see what we could do here. There's something called selective color, which could be very helpful for drawing just specific colors out. So we're going to go to Adjustment, Selective Color. And of course, this will select all the reds in the photo, and it'll add all these different ink colors to it. So with the reds, we can increase blue or reduce it. You know, we can go through each color and see the effect. And it can be quite dramatic, kind of what you can pull out. So we want to pull out either yellows or greens. So we got to figure out what color that is. It's not exactly green. So it could be the yellows or greens where we're going to be able to affect it. So let's try green. Just trying to see the effect. You're not going to know until you try. And then another thing we could do is a lot of times there's a lot of whites and grays in photos. They may look like color. They may look like color, but there's a lot of neutrals. So let's try the neutrals and see. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we found it. So there's actually a lot of gray in those leaves. So what we're going to do is we're taking all the grays. We're going to add a little bit of cyan. Look at that. Look at the difference. Oh, that is so much better. Oh, that's even better. You know, we don't want to have blue right here, so let's reduce that. See all that vibrant green that's coming out? Yes, that's what I want. And it's not affecting the red flowers because we're just selecting the gray. And there's not a lot of gray in the flowers. So let's do the same thing for blacks. So we can even make our photo overall a little darker that way. Notice how just a little bit of change makes such a big difference of this photo. So I'm going to go and click on OK. So that was after. That's before. So look how dull. There was a lot of gray in those leaves. And look at that. Much, much better. I feel very happy with that. We can go back and add our little dark effect, and I may need to kind of tweak that quite a bit. I actually might redo that to make it a little more fresh. So now what we need to do is one more thing in terms of photo editing. We need to bring out pops of highlights and shadows. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our dodge and burn tools next. We're going to do that in the next lesson.